This is Rebase.
So what do you do for a living? Oh yeah? How's that? These are questions you hear on a regular basis. And maybe you used to answer with excitement, with passion, with joy, but now you dread even answering the question. Well, I'm here to tell you this is not a show that's going to tell you how to quit your job and start a new company. Maybe that's not for everybody. It is, however, a show that will help you to rediscover your purpose, that passion, that joy, and that fulfillment in what it is you do. Or, if nothing else, you might figure out what it is you should be doing on a daily basis. This is Rebase. We're here to help you transform your career and change your life. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rebase. This is Sean. I'm joined once again by my wonderful co-host, Alicia. Alicia, how are you doing?
I am fantastic, Sean. How are you doing?
Doing wonderful. There's a lot of wonderful things going on in my life, a lot of changes, a lot of excellent changes, a lot of surprising challenges coming to light. And despite or because of all of that, we're here together today to drop some more knowledge bombs on our wonderful fan listener base.
Knowledge bomb's the only way to go. Got to share the love.
Drop the bombs, people won't see the impact.
And that's what we're about here, is just making the magic and making the impact.
Even if it leaves craters in our wake, right?
Isn't that what love is?
That was probably the country song somewhere.
I know.
If it's not, country music lyric writers, songwriters.
Note this.
Craters in my wake. Next great Garth Brooks hit.
Oh my God.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about something that was topical, maybe not as recently, but it is topical, ongoing. Just because LinkedIn featured it maybe a month ago, we're going to talk about loneliness in the workplace and how this has become even more prevalent in the modern workplace. Are you ready to get into this, Alicia?
I am so ready to get into this because it's my sense that more of us are feeling a little bit all by ourselves than we would like to admit. So I want to dive into this so that the people stop feeling alone.
This is where we drop that little that song snippet, the all by myself. I'm not going to sing because God knows nobody wants to hear that.
Not karaoke night with Sean?
Not karaoke night with Sean. There's very few of those. So today we're going to dive into this theme that showed up on LinkedIn and is from an article on Harvard Business Review. Much love to the HBR. And the title of the article was Work and the Loneliness Epidemic, Reducing Isolation at Work is Good for Business. And it was written by Vivek Murthy. And we'll get into Vivek Murthy's credentials here in a minute. But so this talks a lot about how the modern workplace provides a lot of great tools and a lot of great technology, feeding back into our previous episode about how technology affects the future of work, but it also dives into some of the unfortunate side effects. So I'm just going to start reading through the article, and Alicia is going to stop me at any point where she feels the need to point out something that she's come across in her experience, and I will do the same. So the article begins, on August 24th, 1992, in the early hours of the morning, my family and I stepped out of our temporary shelter to find our city, and our lives forever changed. We had spent the past several hours huddled together as Hurricane Andrew battered our South Florida neighborhood with torrential rain and winds near 170 miles per hour. We saw pieces of homes strewn across the landscape, power lines flung about like pieces of string, and sea creatures stranded in trees having been blown far inland by the storm. Like thousands of others, we survived the storm and the many dark days that followed because of the kindness of strangers who brought food, water, and comfort. Hurricane Andrew forged a deep sense of connection and community in South Florida as the nation rallied around us and as we supported each other. But slowly, as normal life resumed, the distance between people returned. We went back to our homes, our work, our schools, and our lives, and once again, we grew apart. Looking today at so many other places around the world ravaged by disasters of all kinds, I think about how often tragedy brings us together and how fleeting that connection often is. So there is good reason to be concerned about social connection in our current world. Loneliness is a growing health epidemic. We live in the most technologically connected age in the history of civilization, yet rates of loneliness have doubled since the 1980s. Today, over 40% of adults in America report feeling lonely, and research suggests that the real number may well be higher. Additionally, the number of people who report having a close confidant in their lives has been declining over the past few decades. In the workplace, many employees and half of CEOs report feeling lonely in their roles. Go ahead.
Yeah, so this is even all of this, there's so many things came out of that. And then, so half of CEOs are lonely because they're at the top, right? So who else, who do you have to talk to when you need to make decisions? But two big things that came out from this for me is this idea that we rally around a problem, we come together around a challenge that we're facing together. So at work, a unifying thing can be a problem that we're all tackling, or a new client that we're all getting, or something like that. But what are the opportunities for us to connect and engage outside of that, and why don't we engage in them? Because so many companies do have now, especially social hours or employee engagement initiatives, or whatever they are. But why is it that people don't participate in those? We'll pull together around a problem, but we won't pull together around just social sort of interaction for the most part.
Right. So when there's a crisis, we all come together, but then whenever we return to business as usual, it's isolation.
Yeah, it's isolation, and we choose not to. And I don't know if it's, some of the things that come to mind for me are, if the work events that are created or programs that are created are sort of these false social constructs. So all employees go to volunteer day. Well, we didn't all choose to go to volunteer day. Somebody told us to go there. So it will be a challenge kind of maintaining that camaraderie going forward, or even creating it while you're there. I've been on a lot of these volunteer days, which, are kind of not really that impactful. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So these are the things we're talking about that are team building, so to speak.
Exactly. Team building, but with this sort of false construct. Like the teams didn't decide to come together on their own. Most people are forced to do a mandatory activity that's taking them away from something that they would rather be doing, or that they need to do, or that, they're on a deadline to create. So I think that there's that piece. And I wonder also what the role of, at least certainly, when I grew up and was learning about how to be at work, there's a difference between like work life is work life and social life is social life, and never the two shall mix. There's a very distinct sort of wall between those two things.
Right. Work is where you get the work done, and then you go fulfill your social needs at a different place.
Somewhere else. So I wonder how much of that is lingering. And I don't know, Sean, what do you see?
I see, I see a lot of what you're talking about. I see a lot of the forced social interaction, but I also see areas where we genuinely try to be social, to be actual, social creatures, and not just for the sake of socializing, but for the betterment of an organization. But not every employee sees that. Not every employee believes in that. And there's still, to your point, there's still this belief that I'm at work, I need to get work done by myself, I'm going to be evaluated as an individual, Therefore, I need to perform as an individual, and then I will either meet or not give a shit about my social life outside of that work environment. So I see a lot of that. And I'd like to continue on with the article because it gives a little bit of insight into the author's background. He says, during my tenure as U.S. Surgeon General, so there's some cred, I saw firsthand how loneliness affected people of all ages and socioeconomic backgrounds across the country. I met middle and high school students in urban and rural areas who turned to violence, drugs, and gangs to ease the pain of their loneliness. I sat with mothers and fathers who had lost sons and daughters to drug overdoses and were struggling to cope alone because of the unfortunate stigma surrounding addiction. And I met factory workers, doctors, small business owners, and teachers who described feeling alone in their work and on the verge of burnout. So again, these are people from students all the way up to doctors and business owners who feel like they're doing it all alone. And I'll admit, even in starting this podcast, even in striking out on my own, even in my day-to-day job where I have a team surrounding me, there are times when you feel like very much you must go it alone, even if you don't actually have to, because you need to prove yourself. Nobody understands the problems you're going through. Nobody really should be helping you because you should be able to figure it out on your own. And I see this at all levels of my organization.
Yeah, this lone wolf, or this I need to get the stuff done to prove that I can do it, or it's slower if I've got to get other people's buy-in. So, I'll run and get things done is another thing that I've seen quite often. And I used to be one of those people who would think that I could do everything by myself. And I wouldn't ask for help, even though help was available to me. And what I've come to discover, and especially through this trip that I've been on for most of this last calendar year, where I've been forced to ask for help, things are actually a lot easier and a lot more fun. And I think, though, that as we're talking about this, in the asking for help, there's a piece of vulnerability that, because if I ask for help, that means I can't do it, which might mean there's something wrong, which might mean, that I might have to show you a part of me that, especially in a professional environment where there's competition to be the best and to not show weakness, that might feel like, okay, I'm just going to power through it by myself, even though the best thing that one could do is reach out for help.
So true. And, it's interesting that you mentioned, not surprising, but interesting that you mentioned that vulnerability piece, because one of the things that I've been teaching or trying to instill in some of my leaders recently is that ability to be vulnerable. Sometimes strategically vulnerable. You don't want to jump in and be like, I don't know what the fuck we're doing, so somebody please help me out.
Yes, there are ways and ways to.
Right. But I mean, vulnerability is not something that's ever taught in school. It's certainly not taught in schools or the high achieving programs where you make or break on your own dime or on your own accomplishments. So working in a team environment is not something that is taught at all, let alone how to let people know that you don't have all the answers and you would greatly appreciate their input or their efforts or their help.
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
So it's one of those things that, I suppose it's something I had to learn myself over the last 5 years or so, that nothing you accomplish is accomplished alone. But you always think well, if it's got my name on it and I'm the one who's getting the promotion for it, then clearly I was the big contributor to this. Well, no, it's really more so that what you've accomplished is from a larger team effort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's from a larger team effort, and even things that we think we do on our own, someone opened the door for you at some point, meaning, and I don't mean maybe the literal door, but someone made a connection for you. Somebody sat down and looked at your business plan. Somebody critiqued your your deck before you gave a pitch. So even the stuff that we think we're doing by ourselves, even if it's your parents who you're calling to say, hey, would you have a look at this? Guess what? You didn't do it on your own. And so something that I've had to learn lately is how to pick the right people to do stuff with. So what are the criteria that you're creating? Because one thing's asking for help. The second thing's ensuring that you're asking for help from the people who are going to give it to you in the way that you need it. And, we're speaking about asking for help within the context of preventing loneliness. We don't need to do this all by ourselves. How can we build teams together? And so something that I've landed on is having a clear picture of what are the criteria of the people who I want to bring onto this project. What are the things they're focused on? What are their values? What do they want to contribute? How complementary are their skill sets? So that you've got an idea of who you're looking for. So to your point just now, you're being strategically vulnerable or asking for help in the fashion that's going to bring about the result that you're looking to create.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I am not suggesting that you should be vulnerable to every person that you work with. There's also a tremendous value, especially as a leader, to showing certainty in certain initiatives and being confident that you're going down the right path. But there is this aspect, which we can get to, I'm sure, in a later episode, about how to choose your allies, how to understand those folks who might use your vulnerability against you. But generally speaking, most people have an intuition about being able to choose the people that they can rely on to at least give a little bit of insight, a little bit of vulnerability, like pull back the curtain a little bit, and to work with those folks to say, is this exactly right? Do you have any insight into the slide deck? Can you provide me some pointers on my pitch? Like those sorts of things. Usually we have a pretty decent intuition about that. Sometimes we don't, to be sure. But generally speaking, we're not bad at choosing people based on their character. It's just a matter of understanding what being vulnerable really means for you and doing so in a way that doesn't allow other people to trample you, along the way. So
boundaries.
Exactly. Boundaries. I've only got the one. No. I want to dig in here a little bit into the roots of loneliness as described in this article, and this is the subheading, the roots of loneliness. Loneliness is the subjective feeling of having inadequate social connections. Why has this feeling increased over past decades? Partly because people are more geographically mobile and are thus more likely to be living apart from friends and family. And an aside, that's objectively true from everything I see in the world. There are way more families who are, distributed across the country than ever before. Indeed, going back to the article, more people report living alone today than at any time since the census began collecting this data. In the workplace, new models of working, such as telecommuting and some on-demand gig economy contract arrangements, have created flexibility but often reduced the opportunities for in-person interaction and relationships. And even working at an office doesn't guarantee meaningful connections. People sit in an office full of coworkers, even open plan workspaces, hey, startup stereotype, but everyone is staring at a computer or attending task-oriented meetings where opportunities to connect on a human level are scarce. And this gets into some of the mechanisms we see that are used to try to force some of these connections. Happy hours, coffee breaks, and team building exercises are designed to build connections between colleagues, but do they really help people develop deep relationships? On average, we spend more waking hours with our coworkers than we do with our families. Again, objective proof through our experiences. We've seen this.
Yep.
But do they know what we really care about? Do they understand our values? Do they share in our triumphs and pains? Usually, people that, at least that I've worked with, take those things home with them.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're not shared at work. Even if they are, it's at a surface level. It's not like deeply shared, right?
Yeah, that's been my past experience. And I'll tell you, early on in my career, when I left the US and went down to work in Brazil, There was a huge cultural shift for me because here in the US, how I was taught about work is what we were talking about earlier. Work is work, personal life is personal life, and never the two shall come together. You just don't talk about your personal life at work. So I start working at a Brazilian firm, and it's Monday morning. People are coming in and sharing about what happened over the weekend. And I'm hearing details about kids and arguments with partners and sex lives and all kinds of stuff. And I am like, why are you sharing this with me? This is not, at first I was really uncomfortable with it because I had been taught a very different way of being. Over time, I came to really value that piece of it because we aren't compartmentalized human beings. No matter how good we think we are at living work at work or home at home, if something is going particularly poorly, especially things are going, then those things tend to fuel each other. But if in particular something's not going very well, there's no way it can't affect your performance in the other environment.
So true. And something that I try to instill in some of my folks when we talk about execution on our initiatives is you're going to have people who they're just going to crank and they're going to be heads down focused and they're going to be your champion for 2, 3, 5, whatever weeks.
Yep.
And then you need to understand that it's going to ebb and flow for them. It's going to ebb and flow for you. And there's going to be things, any number of things that come up. And I talk about this in one of the other talks that I give, that people's motivations at work are going to be influenced by external forces, internal work forces, all these other things. So you can't expect somebody to be the same day to day to day, week to week that they are, because they have their family troubles, they have their financial troubles, they have their at work struggles and challenges. So to expect them to be robots is completely ridiculous. We talked about robots in our last episode. And,
Ooh, spooky.
Yeah, people are not robots. Thank God for that.
Thank God for that.
It really does drive that connection that we feel with them.
Yeah.
But so going back to the article, over thousands of years, the value of social connection has become baked into our nervous system such that the absence of such a protective force like this is part of who we are and part of why we feel safe at work, as an aside. So the absence of such a protective force creates a stress state in the body. Loneliness causes stress, and long-term or chronic stress leads to more frequent elevations of a key stress hormone called cortisol. It's also linked to higher levels of inflammation in the body. This in turn damages blood vessels and other tissues, increasing the risk of heart disease, diabetes, joint disease, depression, obesity, and premature death. How's that for a laundry list?
Ooh.
Right?
There's a loneliness thing. We got to kick it. This is like a bad habit.
A bad habit. Chronic stress can also hijack your brain's prefrontal cortex, which governs decision-making, planning, emotional regulation, analysis, and abstract thinking. Those sound like things that might be important in the workplace.
Just a smidge. You want to make sure you're showing up with your whole brain, not just your, I'd better run away from this tiger that's about to eat me for dinner brain.
I don't know anything about analysis, abstract thinking, planning, or decision-making that is important at all in my day-to-day.
Not very much of it, I would say.
The next sentence is like one of the...
Or only all of it.
Right. The next sentence is one of the funniest, Captain Obvious statements I've seen. No offense to the author. This isn't just bad for our health, it's also bad for business. Oh, okay.
Yeah. You've got a whole bunch of stressed people walking around, not thinking to capacity and worried about stuff and with their mind on something else, then guess where productivity goes?
And they can't do any analysis. They can't plan. I'm sure the business will be fine.
Cross your fingers. It'll all be great.
That's the best business plan I've seen.
Hopes and dreams.
We're all going to be fine. Cross your fingers and reduce the stress.
Just sit down on the couch and hope it'll go away.
Right. But I mean, what are some of the solutions to this? Because part of the article does state that solving loneliness requires the help of institutions where people spend the bulk of their time. Therefore, our employers, the institutions we work with as a business. And it does state that companies have the power to address this loneliness epidemic quickly. Are they? I mean, that's another question, but they have the power to do so. So, some of the other things that I took notes on are, quotes like, companies need to focus on creating environments that encourage employees to build social connections. And that doesn't mean you force everybody to do a volunteer day. It means that you set up an actual environment where people want to connect with one another. What are some of the things that you've seen where that's successful?
Yeah, I've seen it be really successful at IDEO. So they're no surprise, I think they're also, because they're the big design firm. They're headquartered out of Palo Alto, but they've got offices all over the world. And they specifically design their working spaces so that people must interact with each other. There are open co-working spaces, there are vibrant kitchen spaces, there are movable walls, and people work on teams and projects together, and they're encouraged to share ideas. It's a culture of sharing. So I think that kind of gives them, if we want to call it a competitive advantage on that front, a competitive advantage. But interaction happens naturally, one, because the physical space is designed to promote that, and two, because their company culture and the kind of work that they do, they hire in naturally curious people who are going to inquire about what's going on in this particular space. And that's also a space where there are a lot of physical prototypes of things sitting around. So walking over to somebody's desk and being like, what are you working on here? And it's an actual something new, physical or new project that they're working on. So it kind of causes that sort of interaction. So I've seen that work really well. When I was at Anheuser-Busch InBev, the office that we had in New York has a physical bar that's got beer on tap and beer in coolers. And every Thursday there would be a happy hour where we'd come and all have beer. And that was a space where everybody came, and there was great fun collegial interaction. Most of us continued to go out afterwards. So that really spawned a lot of camaraderie there. Those are two examples.
Great. So not only the physical environment, but also leveraging that physical environment and, like you said, hiring naturally curious people, I think is something that I want to riff on there a little bit, because it is super important for the kind of people that you hire to some degree or another, pull that curiosity out of others, to make it a safe place where they can question one another about what it is you're working on and not feel judged in any way, shape, or form. I mean, for years at UShip, where I'm still currently employed, it took us years to get to team sizes where there are cross-functional groups who will say, oh, we're working on this. What are you working on? Oh, well, that impacts us in this way. How does what we're building impact you? And those conversations naturally start to happen, as opposed to, maybe being more of an artificial sort of, forced process.
Yeah.
Because we want people to be naturally curious about one another, and what our daily lives are. You want them to be invested, I think, is really what I'm looking for here.
Yeah, and I think that the key in that sense is either getting to it sounds like critical mass, or having a physical space, or turning it over to employees to say, what do you guys want to do? I mean, imagine that, asking the people who are working for the company what would be effective and useful and interesting for them in terms of interaction.
Sounds crazy, and like letting the inmates run the asylum. I think we shouldn't do
that. Right? It's like what I've discovered is, if you start to plant seeds around possibility and you offer people opportunities to create together, then they start to do it. Another way that I've found that starts to really unite teams at companies is if there are cross-functional teams going or attending educational opportunities. And I don't say straight up conferences because a lot of times in my experience, conferences could or could not be as sort of serious and focused as, as people would like them to be, right? I mean, let's just be clear about that.
These are often boondoggles conferences. That's all there is to it.
Straight up. But educational opportunities, I've had a couple of times, the opportunity to participate in, so as an example, I was at ABI, they had a global marketing program with Stanford that I was able to attend, and we were working on challenges together as teams all day long. It was great fun. And so that then brought together, because of the amount of sharing of projects and needing to work together, that again broke down those barriers of isolation and really created a great sense of camaraderie.
I love it. And, I will say that, first of all, if you're somebody listening to this or watching this and you're part of a company that isolates everybody, your first step is to just like get out of that and try to get some connection with some other people.
Yeah.
We're talking about companies who are streets ahead, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, my first job in Austin, I won't throw the company under the bus, but I worked on 2 projects in 6 months where I was essentially completely alone. And it was miserable because I had nobody to go to, nobody to consult, nobody to even ask for help, guidance, insight on that project. And so to go to a company where, if you've got 2 or 3 people working on a project, it's still far better than working on something in complete isolation. So if you're working on something in complete isolation, at least try to reach out and find 1 or 2 other people to identify with who can help you with that. If you're at a company where you have small teams or like small limited connections, that's where you try to grow that just a little bit more and try to make those genuine connections with people that you're already involved with.
Yeah, and as you say that, to me it also sparks a nod to leaders, team leaders, no matter how junior you are in an organization or how senior you are. Because you're in that role, you have the responsibility of creating inclusion. You have the responsibility for reaching out to people on your team and ensuring that they are equipped with the tools they need, that you're in tune with and plugged into the kinds of things that will help them be successful and the kinds of things that are worrisome to them.
Yep. Totally agree. And especially if you're a team leader or a young leader, don't worry about going too far in the wrong direction. I'm pretty sure that as far as going in the direction of being inclusive, you're not going to, go to the extreme by any stretch of the imagination. When it comes to companies, creating that environment that encourages employees to build social connections, it doesn't mean you have to go to this stereotypical, like, huge shift in an open office space where there's no more walls, there's no more cubicles, everybody's staring each other in the face. It's not literally the physical environment, it is just defining processes, designing processes, and codifying, certain procedures that just encourage collaboration, cross-functional interaction, maybe throwing away, at least for these conversations, some titles and roles and things like that, and making sure that everybody's opinion is heard. Giving people an environment where they can share personal stories, not deep-seated personal stories, but just things about themselves. Knowing a little bit more about your coworkers is not a dangerous thing. And it's not something people use against you. It helps them to get to know you better as a person. And so many companies resist creating this environment, I feel like, because their concern is really, well, if people are just socializing all the time, they won't get any work done. Well, no, they will do the work you want them to get done, and they will be more efficient and more effective because they shit more about getting it done.
Yeah. A trick that I also learned from a couple of the teams at IDEO is starting meetings with wins. So everybody goes around the table and shares something cool that happened that week. Either, they were able to deliver something great for a client, or they collaborated well together as a team, or so you start out a conversation with not only winning stuff, but stuff that's in support of other people, which is a great way to kind of foster that. And then some other great tools for thinking. I took a class at IDOU So Tim Brown's creativity class, or creativity in organizations, and communicating. One of the greatest nuggets that I got from that was this idea that no idea or thought is a bad idea. Meaning, so you and I are having a conversation or a brainstorming thing about some sort of a project, and I say something that's exactly the opposite of what you think. And your first reaction is, no way, that's not going to work, right? Like, this is it, no way. Well, instead of doing that, saying, okay, even the greatest dissenters, there's some nugget of truth there in the middle of it that we could listen to. And so presuming innocence and looking for that nugget of truth allows for kind of a breaking down of these barriers. Because what we're talking about, like in terms of the work environment and vulnerability, or being vulnerable or not being vulnerable, the not being vulnerable comes from a space of thinking that there's always a zero-sum game happening. If I win, then you lose.
Somebody has to lose, right?
Exactly. And it's my experience that that's not the case. Now, we don't always get to work with people who think that way. And though to the degree that we can, there are ways to foster that kind of collaboration.
Yep, totally. And what comes back to, nothing is ever accomplished by one person.
Yeah.
You come to the greatest business strategy ever, and it was never come to by one person. There's usually some eventually determined bad ideas, some great ideas, some kind of bad ideas, and you pull inspiration from all of those things to come to your plan that maybe eventually works. But one person doesn't just in a vacuum say, this is my idea, this is why it is the best idea. Without dissenting opinions, without alternative approaches, you can't even validate that it is the best idea.
Yeah, it's one of the things of Tim Ferriss's book when he was talking about Tools of Titans. I don't remember which interview this was of that piece.
Only like 1,200 interviews in that book. So.
I know. So one of the ones, I think it was an investment bank or private equity fund or whatever, but basically whenever someone had an idea, a good idea or whatever they thought their strategy was, they created a red team. So the same way that a military force will create a red team in order to attack everything that the good plan is, to figure out where the holes are and to figure out what they're not thinking about, they would do that thing very much on purpose. They would construct an environment where there would be the good idea and then everyone attacking it so that they could really come to the best result, whatever that ended up being.
Yeah, I'm not sure who that was. I think I remember that. It could have very well been Chris Sacca. It sounds like something that he would do. I'm going to poke holes in that just to play devil's advocate. But yeah, lots of great ideas come from dissension, and just crazy off the wall dissension, not even things that people firmly believe in. Just, I'm not sure I believe in that, so let's just throw some contrary ideas out there.
Yeah.
And, we went through a similar exercise in some leadership training that I went through recently, where you start to solve a problem by identifying all the potential roadblocks. And you can, when you're brainstorming, and there are multiple brainstorming phases in this process, there are no bad ideas. You don't throw out and say, yeah, well, Sally's going to be on vacation and Sally's a pain in my ass. So, and like, you can't be like, Sally's okay. It's like, no, Sally's a pain in the ass. Okay, go on, next thing.
Yeah.
You might grab that and say, Sally is going to be on vacation. What does that mean for Steve, who reports to Sally? The Steve's not available, and you might follow that path into like an actual like legitimate roadblock or legitimate blocker or legitimate idea. Like, you need to let people throw things out because they spur other ideas and other people. You can't just dismiss things as dumb or inconsequential or anything outright, because that sort of open brainstorming leads to some of the best ideas you can have.
Yeah. Only 100% of the time.
Only 100% of the time, so not often. But creating these personal connections, we know, are important. Creating an environment where people can trust one another in order to share their ideas is important.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the funniest thing when I think about this, and this comes from the article, is when you talk to executives from all kinds of companies, from a startup in the Bay Area to a giant financial services firm on the East Coast, like no matter what it is, and I'm sure you will echo this, what are the biggest concerns you hear from executives? Communication. Like if you're playing Family Feud and the question is, what do office workers feel most frustrated about? I guarantee you, because I hear this all the time, one of the top 5 answers inevitably will be, I'm always out of the loop. I never have enough information.
Yeah.
Right? So people feel like they're not communicated with enough, and yet we still have office environments and we have technology fueling greater connection, but maybe more shallow connection. People never have enough information. They don't feel like they know what's going on. And I'm quoting the CEO of Slack here, butchering his quote. But I mean, like when they feel like they don't know what's going on, trust drops, isolation gets worse, engagement gets worse. Like this is all from the guy, the CEO of the company, who is responsible for some of the most collaborative communication tools in all day and Slack. And it's exactly that. It's, I don't know what's going on. I'm out of the loop. Like nobody trusts me with information. And you're the CEO saying this, the CEO of Slack, which is supposed to be connecting people.
Yep.
So if they see that, that means that clearly there's an epidemic here of people not wanting to share, people not wanting to build connections with one another in person, via chat, via any other mechanism. So, aside from as leaders trying to enable these kind of communications and trying to be vulnerable ourselves, like what else do you see as sort of the path forward?
Well, I see creating, using tools like Slack, I think was great. I'm working on a project right now with the libraries at the University of Arizona, and we use Slack to ease communication and to give people more access to more stuff faster so that there aren't these communication sorts of barriers. So I think using tools like that, but it really comes down to, I think this is one of those things that sits with leadership. You've got to, as leaders, we have to create cultures of communication where people are incentivized to maximize communication and collaboration, as opposed to, again, it goes back to this mindset of scarcity. If I win, you lose. If I look good, you look bad. If you look good, I look bad. The zero-sum game needs to go away. And really, because I've been in those situations, as you're reading through this paragraph of I didn't know about Project X, and then I found out about it a different way, and so now I'm out of the loop. So what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my job? What does it mean for how I'm sitting? Does this mean that there's something wrong with my performance, that somebody isn't communicating with me? How do I get myself out from behind the 8 ball? And so all of those things.
And if you don't mind, how does that feel? Right?
Oh, it's horrible.
I feel like nobody trusts me, even though it was probably an oversight. When you feel disconnected, you feel completely out of the loop, and you feel like you're somehow being boxed out. And it's just human behavior. It's human nature. Like, even if it was just an oversight, we have the tendency to be like, well, why would they box me out from that? Am I getting, downsized? Am I getting laid off? Like, we're still human creatures. So, not to cut you off, and I apologize.
Oh, it's perfect.
It's exactly how we react. Hit my own mic. It's exactly how we react. And I deal with this on a pretty regular basis because, I've been with the company as it's grown, and it's like, you just sent out that email to the entire team. Why didn't I know about it beforehand? And I get that from literally everybody. Why didn't I know about it before everybody else? Well, if everybody knew about it before everybody else, right? But people feel excluded. So as soon as you stop building these relationships, people start to feel excluded, and they wonder why they were left out.
Yeah. No, you hit the nail on the head. And the result of all of that is isolation. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because if I think that you don't want me around, then what am I going to start to do? I'm going to start to lay low. I'm going to start to not speak out as much. I'm going to start to not involve myself in things as much. And so guess what? I'm lonelier. And it becomes a self-fulfilling thing.
So true. So true. So I will give a few bullet points from the article because the former Surgeon General, sorry, I misquote that, U.S. Surgeon General, I was right. Former Surgeon General gave us some bullet points here on creating connection, and then we can give some final thoughts and then tie this one off. But how do you create that connection? You know, obviously some of the things we've already said, but some of the high level things are evaluate the current state of connections in your workplace. So be honest with yourself, determine how much people in your workplace, like how well and how much are they connecting with one another at a deep, even professional level. Build an understanding of the high quality relationships. See what the strongest relationships are in your company or in your organization and in your department, and try to understand the dynamics of why they're so strong and high quality.
Yep. Make
strengthening social connections a strategic priority in your organization. Don't just set up happy hours where it's like, you guys talk, 2 minutes, speed date, learn everything about one another. Like, make it an actual priority. Encourage coworkers to reach out and help others, and accept help when it is offered. So, no more of this
two-way street.
Yes, no more of this lone wolf bullshit. When people offer to help you, accept that help.
Yes.
And
say yes.
Say yes. Yes. Say yes. And then lastly, certainly not least, is create opportunities to learn about your colleagues' personal lives. You know, as a manager, this is like management 101. When you're having a one-on-one meeting with somebody, you're trying to build a relationship with the direct report, sincerely try to understand more about their life.
Yeah, imagine that.
Right? They're not just a number on your roster. They have significant other, they have kids, they have a backstory, they have parents, they have social issues, they have all of these concerns, they have all these, you know, hopes and dreams and worries and concerns and stressors. Learn more about those, because you could ask them what their career goals are, but if you really understand their life, you might be able to help direct them in the right direction.
Yep. It's that simple. Connect, connect, connect.
Simple, not always easy, but it is simple.
There you go. There's the magic.
Awesome. Do you have anything else to add to this about how to destroy loneliness? We're just going to do it.
Destroy loneliness. My parting words on destroying loneliness would be to take matters into your own hands. This is another one of those places where, as we start to sort of step away and we feel lonely, and you know, we hope that someone else will come along and say hello to us. Well, it sort of works that the more you say hello to other people, the more they're going to say hello to you. So take the initiative, own it, and create the kinds of connections that you want to have.
Yep. Don't be afraid to create connections with people. Sometimes people resist, but inevitably people want to connect. So if you're just a person who genuinely wants to connect, I think you will find that others want to do the same. My closing words are not even my own words. So,
well, we'll take them.
Absolutely. But they come from this article, and they come from marketing consultant Sharon Sears. And I'm going to share this because I want you guys to share this episode with people in your own words. Sharon Sears says, next time you find yourself wanting to refer a coworker to an article, a body of work, an author, or a corporate asset, don't say you'll send the link. Tell them about it in your own words. Bring back the real conversation.
There you go.
Myself, which is why I didn't say it myself. Share this conversation. Talk about how important it is to have real connection in the workplace, and cultivate that real connection in the workplace with other people. You have no idea how much you can change their lives and how much of an impact you can have. Alicia, do you have anything else to share?
I think that's a great last word. We can shut it down for this week.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Rebase. As always, we love and appreciate every single one of you for tuning in and listening to us. And hopefully we are able to transform your career and upgrade your life. Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks again for tuning in to this Rebase episode on loneliness in the workplace. For links, show notes, and more, you can go to rebase.show/8. That's rebase.show/8. All of our episodes are available on the website, and you can subscribe using rebase.show/iTunes/Google Play or /Stitcher, or from your mobile device, go to rebase.show/feed. You can join the party on Facebook by searching for Rebase, or on Instagram, the username Rebase Show, all one word. We'd love to hear your feedback, so please leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or whatever podcast platform you prefer. Thanks again for tuning in. We can't wait. Till next time.